real estate is the single greatest wealth creator in the history of the United States. So if you're not into it now, regardless of how you get into it, stay in it. It is a lifelong career. I've been at it, almost 30 years. Rod is equally as long, and I've loved almost every minute of it.
Welcome. This is the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. This is where you'll learn strategies to help you achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host, Riyad Khleif, has owned over 2,000 homes and apartments, and he brings experts in all aspects of real estate investment and management onto the show. Now, here's your host, Riyad Khleif.
Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow. I'm Riyad Khleif, and I'm very glad you're here. First of all, I want to apologize to all of you that have waited for my book as long as you've waited. You have been so patient, and it's taken so much longer than I anticipated, but I promise you it'll be worth the wait. And for those of you that don't know about it, I've written a book about multifamily real estate investing. It's about 220 pages long. It's like a textbook about everything you need to know and do to buy multifamily property, from picking a market, how to determine what's a good market, the 4 best top places to pick initially, how to develop relationships with brokers, what to say, how to talk to sellers, how to convince them to give you seller financing, how to manage the property, how to fund it before you buy it. There's no fluff in this thing. It's like I say, it's like a textbook. And for those of you that haven't heard me talk about it before, I'm giving it away to you guys, my listeners, for free until the end of the year. I've got thousands of you that have already gotten on the list for it. And again, I thank you so much for your patience. Trust me, it'll be worth it. But those of you that are not on the list, all you got to do is text my name, Rod, to 41411, and you're on the list for it. So make sure you get on it, because early next year it's going on Amazon. Then I'm going to charge for it. It's definitely going to help you. The reason I did it is I take free calls from you guys every week, about 8 of those a week, and I'm usually booked out a couple months in advance. And pattern had emerged, and almost to a one needs some help, some guidance, and I know this book is really going to help you towards that goal. So anyway, make sure you get on the list if you're not on it. And you guys are in for a real treat today. The guy I'm interviewing today, his name's Frank McKinney, and I've interviewed him before, and he's a rock star in real estate development. He's a best-selling author in 4 different genres. He's an entrepreneur, and most importantly, he's an incredible philanthropist. Frank's one of my heroes because of his philanthropy, which we talked about last time. He's built homes for over 10,000 people in Haiti, and because on the last interview on the podcast here, we actually focused more on the psychology of taking action. Frank, on that segment, offered to come back and do an interview focused on real estate. And because so many of you asked me to make that happen, here he is. So, Frank, welcome back, buddy.
Oh, this is great. Anytime we have a chance to talk real estate, I love it. You love it. We've been around. We're not new. We're not wet behind the ears. I saw you not but 3 or 4 weeks ago at an event in Sarasota. And
right.
It was, and what kind of event was it? No, it wasn't a Tupperware convention. It was a real estate event. And what do we do for 3 hours? Talk real estate. So today I'm excited to get more into the, I'm not the best, I will say, I'm not the best how-to guy. I'm the best how-to stick-to-it guy. But, I'm glad that we can delve into some of the actual, systems and approaches that I believe work for the buy and hold investor today.
Fantastic. Before we started recording here, you mentioned branding. Can we start there? Let's talk about branding. I mean, you're the master of it. I mean, I know you've jumped over houses and motorcycles at presentations, jumped over your replica of the first house you ever built. So I'd love to hear your view on branding.
Yeah, I think it's important that we distinguish that I am not a buy and holder, and I don't want people to turn off the podcast now. But I've been in the business for 25 years. If you are a buy and holder, you are really in a commodity driven or commodity type of business. You are competing with thousands within a depending on where you live, within a 2 or 3 mile radius of any generally populated area of the United States. You're competing with thousands of other rental apartments or houses.
Right.
So what are you going to do to set yourself apart? I know, your podcast is almost 100,000 people download this thing. And I know I listened to part of one the other day that you had a guy on there that had 10,000 units, 35,000 units. Right. I mean, I you know how hard it is to get to 35 units, let alone 35,000.
Right.
What is he doing different in branding and setting himself apart than every other landlord out there? And obviously, I didn't listen to the whole thing. And for those of you who did or haven't, you should. If you didn't address this, my approach to our industry, it is our industry, regardless if you're a buy and holder, like like you are and like most of your listeners are, or I'm a buy, add value, and sell individual, how are you going to set yourself apart? How are you going to accentuate the gifts that God has given you, professional gifts that God has given you, not spiritual gifts, professional gifts that God has given you, to cause for your customer, your tenant, your prospective tenant, to choose your unit over somebody else's? And that starts with personal branding. And I remember down here in South Florida, there was a guy by the name of Mr. Townhouse. Mr. Townhouse. It was the silliest name I ever thought. He'd been to my treehouse before. He's donated to our charity. And over a period of a decade or two, I think he's probably still on Google. That's what he does. He buys, holds townhouses, and he sells them. I'm sorry, he rents them. And that was his niche, just townhouses. So for somebody who, let's get away from the 10,000 unit guy and the 35,000 unit guy, and the person who's trying to build a portfolio of his first 10 units, right? That's where we got to start somewhere.
Right.
Delineating what you do differently. Is your tagline more square feet, less money? Is your tagline, why, and this is anti-Frank, but, why own when you can rent? The American dream is cheaper to rent than it is to own. I don't know, but something that will set you apart and make the tenant pick up the phone or go onto your website and look at your floor plans or look at your offerings. And that, if you don't, then you're just going to be like, lemmings packed into shining metal boxes, as Sting sings in one of his songs. Nothing's going to delineate you from your competition. So for me, it started with accentuating it, just a distinguishing physical characteristic, like longer hair. I don't really look like a real estate or a businessman for that matter. And I chose not to. I just, I didn't want to. I never want to, and I don't think anybody should compromise who they are. So I just chose to roll with it. And this is the way it was when I was a teenager, and this is the way it is in my 50s still. And it allowed me to be the artist that is a real estate investor. Granted, I paint on a canvas known as the Atlantic Ocean, right? And I build these beautiful spec homes on beautiful homes on speculation and sell them for tens of millions of dollars. So I'm a buy and holder until I sell. Right. I sometimes I'm holding something for more than a year.
More than you want to sometimes. Right.
But I've made and if you strip it all down, okay, how does the general public perceive the business you and I are in? I mean, it's not very sexy. It's not very attractive. It's one step away from the Intel microprocessor assembly line. I mean, housing. We are providing housing and buy and holders, unless you're providing real high-end rentals, which I bet very few people are, you're providing basic entry-level homes. What is exciting about that? Absolutely nothing. You have to make it exciting. You have to inject with a syringe passion into that buy and hold strategy or that buy and hold approach so that tenant, that prospective renter, visits your place first, and then we'll get to later. Once he visits, what's going to cause for him or her to rent from you and not the competition?
Sure. I know I've had some guests on the show that have talked about different marketing type strategies. This whole branding idea, I suppose you could use technology to set yourself apart, videos of the units, which is not common certainly not in the smaller apartment communities. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I always like to start with a play on words on your name. So if you gave me 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I could come up with something with Riyad Khleif that would equate to buy and hold and why they should rent from you. And so something that jumps out. I remember I worked with a woman who, if she was a buy and holder, she was an opera singer. And I helped, she was a better opera singer than a real estate investor, but we used her ability as an opera singer and just her being known as an opera singer to draw people into her, renting from her, and I always like a tagline: more square feet, less money. I used to use, why rent the American dream when you can buy it? Reverse that. It's cheap. Maybe it's cheaper. There's a lot of places that it is cheaper to rent the American dream than own it. Why own the American dream when you can rent it from me for less money per square foot? Some big over the top promise, and that's going to get people to call. I mean, first of all, it's evocative. You don't ever want to provoke somebody. You want to evoke them into a state of mind where they're going to say, why should I buy the American dream? I think I should rent. Oh, here's why I should rent it. Here's why I should rent it from Rod. because it's more square feet for less money.
Absolutely, and that's actually factual sometimes, and you would, that would be unusual for somebody to use that as a tagline. Why rent? Why buy when you can rent for less money? I love it.
But you got to inject a little bit more evocative. Why buy when you can rent? You hear that all the time, but why buy the American dream when you can rent it from Rod for less money per square foot? I mean, that's going to get people thinking. And yet, guess what you're still doing? Inside that one sentence, you're still delivering the American dream. Because there's a perception out there that you really you have to own the American dream, right? That is a perception. It's not let's go rent a house with a white picket fence. It's let's buy it. And why not turn that on its head and say, in my geographic area, if somebody cared for you to get in there and prove it, meaning, the cost of living, the down payment versus asset security, I mean, there's a way you could prove in many areas that it would be cheaper to rent the American dream than buy it.
Right. And frankly, things are shifting that way anyway. Millennials don't want to buy, they're renting. Many of them are saddled with so much student loan debt, that they have to rent. And so, maybe there's a play there. I love it. Come up with a tagline and, maybe identify yourself.
Yes, yourself. Work yourself in there. It can be a caricature of yourself on your business card, something. Rod's got really nice white teeth. Maybe on his business card, he's got really white, whiter than white teeth. I don't know, but something that really, in mine is my hair, whatever. It does make, because you want people to first remember you. And then once they remember you for your promise, and it needs to be a little bit over the top. You can't be, humble or meek with your promise. Right. Why buy the American dream when you can own it for less money? I mean, bold. That's the first step. The second step is when they get in the front door of your property. Now, because remember what I've always said, Frank McKinney doesn't come with the $10 million house that he sells. My job is to get you there. You can hate my hair, my clothes, my act, what have you. The true show starts when you walk in the front door of one of my houses. That has to be the exact same for any one of your buy and holders.
Absolutely. You guys have to spend the time. So how would you take how would you take an apartment, typical 1-2 bedroom apartment, and you got any ideas for differentiating there?
Well, here's what and we're going to talk to the person who's from 0 to 10 units, maybe 0 to 20 units.
Okay.
Because of your 100,000 people that download these things, I'm going to guess that 90% of them are in that category.
Starting for sure. Yes,
starting for sure. So here's what you got to do, and it's hard. And it did apply to my buy, add value, and sell, because I am a buy, add value, and sell individual. I've never held on anything unless I was forced to. I always, in the beginning, and it never changed, by the way, Rod, to this day, but in the beginning, I was bent on and committed to spending a little bit more money on my finishes than I probably could have, meaning I compressed my own margin in an effort to build my reputation. So here's a simple, you have a 1,000 square foot apartment, 1,800 square feet, a small 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment.
Right.
You can go and put in the $20 a yard carpet or $15 a yard, whatever's the cheapest stuff. I mean, the stuff that goes in my houses. I just bought carpet for my new micro mansion that was $212 a yard. So it's really nice. So whatever the entry level carpet is, you can get away with it, but would it be in your best interest in 1,000 square feet, which is only a couple more bucks per yard, to spend $25 a yard or $20 a yard, a little bit more for a little, or maybe put in a little bit thicker padding? All right. So there's one way. Are you going to go with the cheapy appliances, or are you going to put a GE set of appliances in there? You got to put a good appliance package in there. They're gonna put their hands on that appliance 4 to 5 times a day. 4 to 5 times a day, they're going to touch it. Their feet are going to touch that carpet every step that they take, including the first step in the door.
Right.
So those two little places, primary places you're going to spend money. Paint, of course, you're going to, instead of one coat, you'll put the 2 coats of paint on there.
Right.
Your bathroom fixtures, if it's a 2-bedroom house and 2-bathroom house and it's got a master, maybe the secondary bathrooms get Delta, and the primary gets a Moen faucet, a Moen shower head. Spend just a little bit more money. You have started with that first customer to establish the fact that A, you know how to market, A, you know how to deliver the American dream, renting it less than owning it, and you've delivered a really nice product for the money. You can probably, when they walk in the door, I don't know where these people are renting across the country, but if the average rent on that 1,000 square foot apartment is, let's say $1,000 a month, Can you charge $1,050 because it's a little nicer? I mean,
absolutely, guys. Those of you listening, I mean, if you've got brand new stainless appliances that you're able to make work in your financial numbers, and you're competing at that price level, $1,000 to $1,100 a month, you can get that extra $50 or $100 a month for having the little extras that he's talking about here. Now, they're going to cost, no question, and you've got to factor those in when you run your financials. But if you're in a highly competitive market, this absolutely makes sense. I don't discount the value of being better than the neighbor, because you could very likely pull people directly from your competitors versus people that are coming in from the outside.
Rod, you use the word cost, and yes, there's a financial metric that has to make place. You're going to plug your numbers in, but don't lose sight of how much it could cost you in reputation if you cut corners. If you say, I mean, I did it in my early houses. Look, between the late 80s and early 90s, I did hundreds of houses worth less than $100,000. So if those were to rent, they would have rented for less than $1,000. And on the early ones, some of them I did go to the appliance companies that had bought secondhand appliances. And I thought, oh, good, I'll save $500 in my appliance package, and I'll put them in the house. Secondhand, they look clean, and they were, but you know what? They weren't new.
Right.
And you know what they didn't have on them? And this is a silly little tip, but I put it in my real estate book, Burst This, among many other tips that people could follow. Even buy and holders could read my Burst This book and benefit. Is the energy efficiency yellow sticker that are on your appliances?
Right.
Leave them on. Nope. Don't take them off. It shows nobody's going to pay attention to how efficient it is. You know what shows? It's new.
Right.
And very few people renting apartments from scumbag landlords have ever enjoyed a nice brand new refrigerator. I guarantee you. So leave them on. I mean, those little tips like that, and they'll go to their girlfriend or their wife and say, honey, you know what? Rod's place is $1,100. Mr. Scuzzy landlord is $1,000 a month. Let's pay the extra $100. Those were nice appliances. Did you feel that carpet? You see that shower head in the master bathroom? And guess what? It cost you an extra $100, but how much did you just invest in your reputation as a top-notch buy and holder, top-notch landlord?
Sure. And typically you'll get the better tenants as well, when you've got the nicer unit. So no, that all makes sense. I know you're an expert at systemization, and you have to be to put all the moving parts together that you do on your multi-tens of millions of dollars worth of houses that you flip or build. Can you speak to systemization a little bit as it relates to my listeners?
Yeah, maybe from the macro perspective, okay. It has to do with the brain, and here's how it kind of goes for me. The more I can systemize, the less I have to think about when it comes to the application of those systems, the more space is left in my mind for creativity. So when something's on a system, and believe me, buy and holders, you have to be on a system. I guarantee your 10,000 unit guy has an ironclad system where he pushes a button or opens his computer and watches this thing flow like a flywheel. He don't have to do anything. He's systemized. What he's worried about is going out and getting another 1,000 units.
I've actually heard the definition that really any business, and I subscribe to this definition, any business is just people and systems. And the same thing applies here.
It does, but yet in any business you have people, meaning people I'm going to count these people other than yourself, and you have systems that run the widget, the apartment building and the people, right?
Right.
But there has to be space for creativity and ingenuity and approach. And what for example, the micro movement, I'm not going to talk about in terms of what I'm doing, but it is relative to what I'm doing at the high end. There are tiny apartments that are being rented out there. People are loving these little tiny apartments
and tiny houses. I've seen these little houses that are, they're as big as my office here. The whole house.
Then they're okay. So forget a lot of people are selling those. Some people are renting those out, and the cachet and the kind of the uniqueness, the cool factor is wonderful. People are paying a premium, especially in places like California, San Francisco and New York, where space is at a premium. But on a per square foot basis, the landlord's making out great. You as the investor is making out great. If you don't have space in the mind to think about something like that, because all you're worried about is, grinding day by day because you don't have a system, you'll never come up with the next tiny house concept or something like that. So I love, listen, I mean, it's hard. You have to train the brain to be both artistic when it comes to your real estate career and systems driven.
Well, and creative as well. I mean, and you're talking about creativity. Creativity comes into many places. It comes into how you buy the property, how you finance the property, how you structure it. There's so many places that you can be creative in this business. And unless you have systems, like you said, to handle the day-to-day grind, the calls that come in from residents, and you have systems to show those units, you have systems to manage them, systems to handle the maintenance. Unless you've got that down, you don't have the bandwidth to be creative.
And amen. That's exactly what I'm saying. Amen. Because creativity and ingenuity are what sets winners apart from losers. It's not the systems. The systems you can go buy. That is not it. You can implement those, but what will set you apart from every other landlord, buyer and holder, is the creativity and ingenuity on all those aspects Rod just referenced. You know, the buy, the fix, the rent, the fix the toilet, the design, the furnishings, whatever. You got to spend, and I've gotten so good on the system side with the people that I can't even say that. I was going to say I'm more artistic, creative than I am systems driven, but I think anymore I'm not. I'm as good at both as one as I am the other. But I do devote a lot of time to the creative side. I have to, because my houses have to be works of art.
Sure. No, I actually count that as one of my biggest attributes, as well as my ability to systemize. I mean, how I was able to buy 2,000 houses one at a time from different owners. I mean, it was systems with a very small team. So, that's something I'm actually pretty good at as well. In fact, I'm much more than the creative side. I wish I had more of the creativity. But I totally see your point that you won't have the mental energy to be creative. And guys, in the multifamily industry, there are so many ways to be creative as it relates to how you acquire the properties specifically. I mean, that's the biggest area in my mind I'm thinking of right now, and how you structure a deal with a seller so that you're in their minimum, with minimum out of pocket, or a really great, interest only loan with low interest rates. Ways to structure these things so you're really winning and creating a situation where the seller is winning as well. So, I mean, that's just one area. So systems are very, very important. In fact, I was just on a coaching call yesterday, and the guy asked me, he said, "Do you have any systems for property management?" And he kind of stumped me, because I've developed my own, but there's really nothing being marketed out there. And I came back to him and I said, I think you just have to get good software, and inside of the software there will be a lot of systemization. But it's funny that this conversation you and I are having is right after that one, because it's the same thing. This guy recognized the fact that you have to have systems when you're in a buy and hold strategy. So I love it.
The last point on that, just to kind of bring it full circle, is Rod mentioned, in all likelihood, of you're listening right now, you can classify yourself as more of a systems-driven individual or an artistic or creative individual. Okay, so let's say Rod and I are on different sides of that camp. Maybe I'm a little more artistic; he's a little more systems-driven. Once Rod implements whatever his systems are, nobody has a monopoly on creativity. It can be learned. It is a lobe of the brain that needs to be exercised, needs to be expanded. So Rod has done that, even though he says, "I wish I was more creative." Well, with his systems that he has implemented, guess what? He will become more creative because he wants to be, and he has time to be. So, for those of you who think, "Oh gosh, what's Frank talking about on the creative side?" It's not just the color of paint you're going to pick out. Rod's unequivocally right. I'm getting ready to start our next micro mansion, and I can't say much about it. I'm in due diligence. I structured a very creative way to buy a direct oceanfront piece of property while I'm waiting for the first one to sell. I'm building this one and we're furnishing it and all this, we're in the throes of it right now. Had I not had that on the system right now, I wouldn't even be able to think about the next project. But it is on the system, and so we are able to, just the most important element of real estate is how you buy it. It's not how you rent it or how you fix it up and sell it. It's how you buy it, and you need to be able to be creative in your approach to doing the same.
Well, I will add a caveat, and this is me pounding myself on the chest. I actually think it's creative to set up systems. I think it involves creativity, but anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole. So I know you and I have a potential slight disagreement about buying and holding versus buying and selling. So let's expand on that, because everybody that listens to my podcast knows I consider myself a real estate buyer, not a real estate seller. And I've interviewed people that, like you mentioned, one guy, Al Bear, is my first interview, has 35,000 apartments. And he actually stole that statement from him, that he's a real estate buyer, not a seller. And, I just interviewed Ken McElroy. It came out this last week. And he also has, about almost $1 billion worth of real estate. That's, I think, 700 million. And he also said the same thing, and that he hardly sells anything. Let me hear your take. I know you've got a different perspective.
No, I really don't.
Okay.
I think for me, here's why what I do works for me. Okay. So a real estate buyer, not a seller, it's a very different mindset than the one that I have. And one is not right and the other wrong. Both mindsets make a lot of money.
Right.
And again, this is to be inventoried against your personality, your listener, you listening. You need to inventory this against your personality. A person who buys and never sells is going to slowly and methodically build up that portfolio, where maybe unit 1 through 5, you're a couple $100 per unit positive cash flow, and so your objective as you grow the number of units is to grow the amount of money per unit that you're positive every month, minus mortgage and minus taxes and insurance and all that stuff. That is the metric by which you measure a successful buy and holder, period. And so now that as you get good at that, my first $100,000 houses that we were doing, Rod, okay, selling for $100, I was making about a $7,000 to $10,000 profit. Okay, not bad. By the time I was done in that price range, nothing else changed. My profit was $25,000 per house. So what did I do? If you use that analogy with the buy and holder, let's say he was positive $200 a month of positive cash flow on unit 1 through 5. But by the time he got to unit 50, he was positive $400 a month, because he just got better at the craft of real estate, be it buy and hold or buy and sell. I got really good at buying better, which you do with time, improving better, because at the beginning I didn't know what I was doing, and getting 104% of retail. Like I was selling at top dollar, where at the beginning I was selling at 96% of retail. All that adds up to the difference between a $10,000 profit for me and a $25,000 profit.
Let me add a caveat there, because you use an analogy of somebody getting more per month per their unit, which is definitely the goal. But I will take that to down a different road, and that is when you become an expert in this business, it's really about having the capability and the knowledge and the resources and the connections to buy more property, syndicating, bringing in investors. And yes, you'll get a smaller piece of the pie, but half of 100 units is a whole lot better than than all 100% of no units. So, that's another direction. I mean, that's another metaphor for what Frank just said. And that is, as you become better and better and more confident and competent, and your intuition honed and your abilities honed, you'll have the ability to go out there and buy more units, put more deals together, syndicate deals, bring in partners, and grow your cash flow quickly that way. So that just an aside.
And I just want to, I'm in first gear. Right. Okay. That statement you mentioned that's like a third gear statement. You've already moved down the road. I'm talking to the guy, right now, a beginner, he can't think about syndicating and getting out there and putting deals together. That's tough. If what builds confidence to be able to syndicate and grow is profit. Once you're making and you're positive and you're not oh my God, how many investors are listening on this call that have units that are not positive cash flowing? There's a lot of them out there. It happens.
I hope not. But it does happen. It happened to me with my single family.
It happened to you, and it happens to a lot of people. People get excited about what I call dealitis. Right. Dealitis is a disease. They buy, they overpay, they overimprove, and guess what? I can't positive cash flow this, but I got to go out and buy another deal.
Right, and that's something you guys all need to be very, very careful about right now, because some people are saying we've already started a contraction, and there's definitely one coming. So that's why. My focus is from this point forward, cash flow, and I want you guys listening to have the same focus. But
well,
anyway,
and even if a correction comes, the industry that tends to do better is the buy and holders than my industry. When prices are going up 10, 15, 20%, a year, especially in my geographic area, I'm in the right business to be in. The rental market isn't as strong as me adding the value that I can, and doubling or almost doubling my money on every deal that I get into. So, but back to the test, the litmus test on buy and hold versus buy and sell. So, what works for me is, and we're going to do the extreme example and then a little bit of a hybrid for the buy and holder. I'd like them to keep this in the back of their mind. The extreme example is, I personally enjoy taking that blank canvas, fixing it up, back in the early days, and flipping it, which you'll never hear me say those words because I don't like to be, I'm not really a flipper, but flipping it in the early days. And then I have a more project specific mindset, meaning there's a beginning, there's a process, and then there's an end, and there's a closing of the chapter, closing of the book, and you move on to the next project. Start it all over again. Beginning, design, permitting, building, furnishing, marketing, selling, close the chapter, move on, add a zero, go from $100,000 house to $1 million house, up the stakes, do it again. So I personally think my mindset is wired because that's how I started, Rod. I have to qualify this. When I started, my father, who was a banker, and this was back when I was a tennis pro, and I knew I wanted to get into real estate. My tennis students were all very successful real estate investors. Not all of them, but a disproportionate number of them invested in real estate. So I learned my PhD in entrepreneurship and my master's in real estate on the tennis court, teaching people who were really successful in real estate. I want to copy them. So my father, being a banker, a very conservative banker, said, you know what, you don't know a damn thing about real estate. He said, you don't know if you want to be, and he didn't use these words, but I'll use today's words. If you don't want to be are you going to be a landlord? Are you going to retail? Are you going to wholesale? Are you going to go to bank foreclosures? Are you going to go to the storage business? Are you going to be a general contractor? You don't know what you're going to be. You just know you want to be in real estate. So he said, why don't you do this? Why don't you get into what he referred to as a cash accumulation stage, meaning buy and sell a few houses, get to $100,000, clear, free and clear in your bank account, and then you will have done enough deals to decide what are you going to be a landlord, a buy and hold, or are you going to be buying? You'll decide. And I said, what, that makes sense. I need money, I need capital to operate. So
can I pause you there for 1 second? I just want to pause you because, guys, those of you listening, I kind of diss flipping and wholesaling, and I shouldn't do that because it is an excellent way to do what Frank just described and build up a nest egg to utilize to invest in. I hope that you invest in multifamily property and build lifetime cash flow. So I just want to draw attention to what you just said, Frank, because I do think it's a fantastic strategy, and I get a lot of calls from people. I take free phone calls every week for 30-minute phone calls from my listeners, and most of them, a lot of them, don't have the money. They feel like they don't have enough money to get started. And those of you listening, I'm probably going to do some training on flipping and wholesaling just because so many of you guys really need it, and you can utilize it as a vehicle to raise capital to do what we're talking about in this show, which is we're really in my podcast, which is buying multifamily. So I'm sorry to interrupt, Frank. I just wanted to add something in on that.
Well, I think it's good that you did, because going back to giving credit to my father, he like what Rod just said, he didn't know what my real estate career would amount to. All he knew is it would take capital. And so he said, look, you're going to get out there, you're going to learn. And he didn't have a podcast, or I didn't have a podcast like Rod's to fall back on. So my goal, if I'm listening to Rod's podcast, is I want to have lifetime cash flow through real estate, through buy and hold real estate. Okay, how do I get there? Well, at the beginning stages of wholesaling or retailing, even real estate, is a good way to get there for me, because I wasn't sure where my real estate career was going to head. I'm in my early 20s when I'm doing this.
Right.
I simply never left the cash accumulation stage. I never left. The values got higher, the zeros got more, but I realized, what? I am really good at that element. And so once I got good at it, for me at this stage, or even 10 years ago, to say, what, I'm going to stop this and I'm going to go ahead and just buy a bunch of apartment buildings and sit back and collect the rent. That's not what makes me tick, and right. I wouldn't enjoy that. But for those who want almost a recession-proof lifetime cash flow opportunity, what Rod teaches is the way to go. I like the excitement of not knowing when I'm going to get paid. I just kind of I live on that. And it's proven perfect for my personality and my lifestyle.
And any of you that have ever seen a picture of Frank, he even looks like that kind of person too. I just want you to know that.
Well, but I got you. Listen, I'm having an event here soon called the Aspire event, which we'll talk about in a minute. And
Awesome.
part of that Aspire event is I'm going to teach people how, at this stage, unless you're at my event and you're about 8 years old, we are who we are. We can't change who we are. We can only redirect certain maybe negative self-destructive tendencies towards something constructive. Case in point, my need for speed and excitement and adrenaline and all that stuff, I could have done some really destructive things with it, but guess what? I chose to channel it in a constructive area, high-end, speculative building. You better believe I know I'm alive every day because I don't know when I'm going to get paid. And it worked for me. So, I think that the other thing that is a little more practical, so everybody listening says, well, I want to know when I'm going to get paid, and I want the reliable cash flow in almost any economy, which is the case for what Rod teaches. Not the case for what I do for a living. Right. But I would ask you to do this. As you're collecting your units, and as you're putting your syndications together, and as you're growing to that 10,000 unit guy or 35,000 unit guy, I do believe at some points along the way, you will find that real estate values have run up maybe a little bit more, not maybe, obviously a lot more than what the standard rate of appreciation is. So if you bought a house, and Rod, I know he's going to disagree, but you bought a house for $100,000, and in 5 years it's worth $200,000, and you've paid your mortgage down to $50,000, and you see another opportunity somewhere on the other side of the tracks where you could buy, instead of one, you could buy 5 units. If you sold that place for $200,000 versus holding on to the one that you paid $100,000 for, I think there's times when a buy and holder should take some chips off the table, move that capital somewhere else, leverage it somewhere else where you can get a greater return per door.
And I'm so glad you used a house as your example, because I would totally agree if you own a house to sell it for multifamily. But if you've got multifamily, I disagree. But no, listen, I that is a fantastic way to get ahead. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't do that. I mean, there are people that have traded up. That's kind of a lot of people have built fortunes trading up. On the other hand, I believe that you can bring in partners, you can syndicate, you can find the resources to continue to buy and to get your investors out of your deals. Your liquidation event doesn't have to be a sale. It can be a refinance once the values have gone up. So, Frank and I have agreed to disagree on how to build your portfolio. But that said, I want to get back to something that you and I have talked about before as well, and that is not being a master of all things in real estate, because as you were describing the story with your father and how he said, go accumulate some money and then decide what it is you want to do in real estate. Guys, I know that multifamily real estate sounds sexy. It sounds like, there's a ton of money. I've had I've had a billionaire on this show, and I've had guys that are gazillionaires, and that's very, very sexy. But if you don't love what you do, life sucks. So, make sure what you're going to be doing you love. And so Frank's dad's idea about building a nest egg, and like I said, I don't have any problem with flipping and wholesaling to raise cash. And then if you decide that Frank's model of building or maybe you love the flipping and the wholesaling so much that you want to continue to do that, but it is important to love what you do.
I would say the last thing I'll leave with, before we close on this subject and this topic, Rod, is please consider yourself a real estate opportunist. Right. You're not, and I mean, it's okay if 100,000 people listening, 99,900 hang up right now. You are not a buy and holder. I'm not a buy and seller. I am not a flipper. I'm not a retailer. I'm not a wholesaler. I'm not a foreclosure specialist. I'm not a contractor. I am a real estate opportunist. When you think with that wide horizon, the opportunities that will fall into your lap because you're not pigeonholed into thinking I will never sell this place, no matter what happens. I mean, because real estate is cyclical, guys. It is, right. And you have to be ahead of that cycle, or at least looking out for the cycle, and be nimble enough to say, as a real estate opportunist who tends to be a buy and holder, right? That's what
right.
You are. But I'm going to have my ear to the ground. And if an opportunity comes to trade up or whatever Rod just said there, I'm like, you want to aspire to be more than what you are today, or you wouldn't be on this call.
Right.
And,
hey, but I'm glad you said that. I want to stop you. I want to hear about that event because unfortunately I'm out of town traveling when you're having it, so I can't go. But please talk about that next.
Okay, we'll talk just a second about it because I love talking about real estate. So this event is I will tell you up front, it's not a real estate specific event. It is a, having written 5 books and gone all over the world talking about different topics, because let's face it, as Rod said at the beginning, my 5 books, there's 4 genres represented there. It's not just real estate. I've got a young reader fantasy novel out, I've got a spiritual book out, I've got a self-help book out, and 2 real estate books out. One thing I've noticed in going to different places and speaking, 2 things that were very obvious to me. One is people grow real tired sitting in a conference room watching PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint. You can time it. I mean, no matter how dynamic I might be, if I put in my speaking contracts, there's no way I'm speaking after lunch because people are falling asleep after the food that they've just eaten. I want to make sure I'm either very first or very last at the end of the day, because people are bored sitting in a conference room. So we came up with an event, and I don't host my own. I'm usually hosted at events. I don't host my own, called Frank McKinney's Aspire event, a moving conference, which is it's a one-day seminar that doesn't sit still, stand still, or stay in one place. Meaning we start, and it's only 50 people, Rod, because I want to make it small and intimate, and plus I got to move people around. We start at my house, which is on the ocean. It's a $7-8 million house in Delray Beach. Start at my house, register here, we learn. There's a couple hours of learning around my pool. We have lunch here. Then we get into my tour bus and we go up and down A1A, which is the road that runs in front of the ocean, and we look at some of my prior projects. And we're going to start at my first $50,000 flipper. We're going to go drive the bus over there. We're going to then drive over to the ocean and look at some of the, not going to go through them, we're going to drive by them and kind of narrate them like Tour of the Stars or whatever in Hollywood. We'll go by and look at some of these beautiful houses. Then we're going to stop at my latest creation, which will be done at the end of the year, called the Micro Mansion, which is basically taking the concept of the beauty, the $4,000 per square foot finishes that I put into my houses. And we're talking about top of the top, beautiful finishes. And wow. I'm not putting them in a 15,000 square foot house. I'm putting them into a 4,000 square foot house. So taking the whole beautiful mansion and just making it much smaller, but the finishes will blow you away. We're going to stop there. Now that will be a real estate specific session where we're going to talk branding. We're going to talk marketing. We're going to talk creating a real estate market like I'm trying to do with this micro mansion concept. And then we come back to my house at the end of the day where we're going to do this leave your fears behind coffin exercise. And it does involve a coffin, and it does involve leaving any fears you have about being the next 35,000 unit owner, buy and holder. We're going to leave those behind, and it involves a coffin. Now, the other part that's important, and why I'm calling the Aspire event, is, folks, I will tell you, after all my years on earth, motivation washes off and goes down the drain with the soap at night. No matter how much good information you've heard on Rod's podcast, if it was purely motivational, it will wear off. You won't retain it. Next level, inspiration. Rod's had some very inspirational people on his podcast. That will last about as long as the effects of a bad sunburn. In other words, it'll hang around. I'm sure it'll resonate, but eventually it goes away. Aspiration, folks. Aspiration will alter your DNA, will change your life and the lives of those you love. Once you aspire to become the guy who owns 36,000 units. Now, motivation and inspiration can get you to what you aspire to. Believe me, I don't discount them, but just know they don't last until you aspire. And who do you aspire to emulate? Whose footprints do you aspire to walk in? What legacy do you aspire to leave behind for your kids or your loved ones? You start to answer those questions and you latch on to them. Like, my aspirational overnight success took me 25 years, but I got there. And I can only count on one hand the things I aspired to do that were not in the cards for me, that were not part of my DNA, that I altered my DNA and became, a real estate artist, an ultramarathon runner, running a huge charity over in Haiti, a 5-time bestselling author. I mean, these were things that were never on the radar, but I aspired to become them. You can't inspire to that or motivate to that. You have to aspire to it. So that's the whole concept. It's a one-day event, Rod.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to miss it, man. I got to tell you,
it's going to be killer. It is.
Yeah.
And we
how do they find out about it, Frank? I mean, I'm going to have it in the show notes, but go ahead and mention it now.
If you're listening, it's one word, Aspire Event, ASPIREEVENT .frank-mckinney.com. So aspireevent.frank-mckinney.com, and Rod will put it in the notes. And you can go. There's an hour by hour itinerary. What we're gonna do, where we're gonna go, and then to come. Now here's the other fun part about it is I make my money in real estate. I don't make a dime from the selling of my books. I don't make a dime from these events. We run a very large charity that has built 24 self-sufficient villages in Haiti. Now we lost 450 houses, schools, clinics, community centers, fishing cooperatives in Hurricane Matthew. When I say we lost all or part of 450 primarily houses, I know all the roofs are gone, and a majority of the structures, even though they were concrete, once a roof goes away, the pressure created by the eye of the storm will cause the four walls to collapse. And so it's, I don't have time to get into the devastation and the heartbreak that we're going through. So if you come to the event, we're using that money. The event was established before the hurricane came. We're going to use that money to help rebuild Haiti. And if you're listening to this and you go to frank-mckinney.com, and I hope Rod will put this up, this I will plug, frank-mckinney.com, and you don't want to come to the event, you can't come to the event, whatever, please consider donating to our Caring House project, because we've got to rebuild 450 houses.
That's fantastic. And I got to tell you guys, those of you that listened to my previous episode, the reason that I got reconnected with Frank was, I read his book, Make It Big, and it had such a big impact in my life. I pulled it off, and I bought it, I don't know how many years ago, and I've given away dozens of copies, but about 8 months ago, I needed a pick-me-up, so I pulled it off the shelf, and I decided to Google Frank and see what he was up to, and I was so impressed with this whole Caring House project, and, that I found out he does one-on-one coaching sessions in his treehouse in Delray Beach, and I literally paid him $3,000 to spend a couple hours with him, because I believe in being mentored by the best. And what impressed me was all that money also went to charity. So guys, this is a fantastic cause, and I hope that you'll help in any way that you possibly can. So Frank, listen, buddy, it's been awesome as it was last time. I really am so grateful for your valuable time, and I'm just very appreciative of the time we can spend together. So thanks, and be well, my friend.
Hey, everybody listening, thank you so much. You have a great resource here in Rod. I know he's got a book coming out soon. I hope you'll get it. Hope you'll buy it and read it and apply it. We are all in the same business. Some of us buy and hold, some of us buy and sell, but real estate is the single greatest wealth creator in the history of the United States. So if you're not into it now, regardless of how you get into it, stay in it. It is a lifelong career. I've been at it, almost 30 years. Rod is equally as long, and I've loved almost every minute of it.
I don't know that I go that far, but I have loved it. Yeah. All right, Frank, take care, my friend.
Okay, take care.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, and then take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. For more resources to connect with us further, please visit our website at lifetimecashflowpodcast.com. Tune in next week for our next show.